Thank you all for inviting me to beautiful Lexington. I think I've been here maybe once before over on the VMI campus, and it's just a beautiful campus, and I understand that you even controlled the weather because you sent snow yesterday on my way in, and I love snow, and it was beautiful, so thank you. Thank you, Dean, for that very kind introduction, and thank you for the party last night, the cocktail reception last night, and the delightful time that I spent with some of your students here today at lunchtime. That was just rewarding. You guys have a gift, and Mary, I'm going to take her back to Richmond with me, so you can say goodbye to her at 3 o'clock because she's going with me. I have never been treated so well. And it's all to this lady. She coordinated every detail of this trip, and it made me feel very special. So thank you, thank you, thank you, Mary. You all have a jewel in Mary. I do want to acknowledge my husband, who is in the back of the room. Some of you got to meet him last night, but he is my designated driver. I got to see the snow because I look up from reading a brief as he's driving, and I get to see the snow. But my husband, the father of my 3 children, my high school sweetheart, my ride or die, he's here today with me. And he tells me that I tend to drop off at the end of a sentence and you can't hear me, so he's designated to tell me to pump up the volume if you can't hear what I'm saying. But it is a true delight to be here with you, especially during Black History Month, and to honor this amazing, amazing attorney, Leslie Smith Jr., for this lecture. And so I'm going to talk with you a little bit about the importance of legacy and encourage you to think about what your legacy might be. And then I hope that we'll have time for questions before the next group comes in. But because it's Black History Month, and because we're talking about legacies, and because Attorney Smith's story is so captivating, I thought I would give you just a brief rest of the story with regard to, we picked up at University of Virginia, is where we started with the introduction. But my cousin Grady tells the story much better than I do, but these are the early years of Cleo Powell. My cousin Grady talks about my great-great-grandfather who walked out of slavery at the end of slavery on a plantation in Brunswick County. And he walked until he was tired, arrived at another plantation, still in Brunswick County, where he then hired himself out as a free man for labor. Part of my legacy, which is very important for you to know, as far as I'm concerned, born and raised in Brunswick County, Virginia. My parents, and at lunch we talked about the benefit of coming from a legal background. My parents, my father had a 7th grade education. My mother had a 10th grade education. They have 6 children. They had 6 children, all of whom have degrees, professional degrees, college degrees, master's degrees, and/or law degrees. So a little bit about the rest of the story. Graduated valedictorian of my class and attended the University of Virginia, and that's where we pick up. But I wanted you to know that because we're talking about legacies and we're talking about history. So I'm very honored to be here with you today during Black History Month. Of course, we all know that Carter G. Woodson started Black History Month to include blacks in the narrative. And during Black History Month, school systems and organizations all over the country dialogue and converse and reflect on the contributions of blacks to the fabric of America. And it's not at all unusual to do a roll call, and we all hear names with which we are very familiar. Lewis and Young and Randolph and Wilkins, Farmer, Tubman, Malcolm, and of course, Dr. King. And we look closely at their legacies, and we look at the contributions that they made to America as we know it. And so today I thought that I wanted to talk to you about legacies, your gift to the world. And while we could talk hours about the giants of Black history, I want to talk to you today about your legacy. How do you want to be remembered? And it may seem strange to some of you, especially the students in the audience here in 2022, where some of you are in your first year of law school. Others of you are in your third year of law school. You haven't yet started your career. And for us to talk today about looking forward when you're receiving the retirement package, or just a little bit more morbidly at your grave site, I want you to think about, what do you want people to say about you? How do you want to be remembered after you've drafted that last contract or argued that last case? And as I thought about this, I thought, well, perhaps the question is more important to me. After 40 years of practicing law, being in the law, loving the law, 29 of those on the bench, it may be just that I'm wondering what my legacy will be. And for better or for worse, 40 years of my legal legacy have already been written. But on the other hand, for those of you who are students, yours is almost a blank canvas, an almost empty page where you can write just about anything and almost start from the beginning. And I say almost because you have begun to write your legacy, whether you came to law school straight from an undergraduate program or whether you had a career before you stepped on the law school grounds. You've already started to write your legacy. And maybe it's just the introduction. Hopefully it's good. And you can continue to write from there. Maybe there are regrets, paragraphs or chapters that you wish that you could erase and have the proverbial do-over. But whether the past is good or bad, today starts a new paragraph and a new chapter, a chance to continue a good story, or an opportunity to turn less than a stellar beginning around. And indeed, to some extent, every day is a new opportunity to get it right, to set right what we wish we had done differently yesterday. I suspect that most of us don't get up in the morning thinking, today I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and that's going to set my legacy. For most of us, the task of living from day to day is so all-consuming that it leaves little time to focus on fast forward. What legacy will I leave for others to remember? What do I want others to see in the rearview mirror of history? Because quite frankly, we have too many cases to read. We have too many clients to see. And we really don't want to think that at some point in our future, perhaps our not too distant future, that all of our lives will be relegated to the pages of history. Most of us are just from day to day living the best life that we can, doing what we believe to be right, trying desperately to be a good human being, to practice the golden rule. And while we're living, our legacy is writing itself. I really doubt that Dr. King set out to be a drum major for justice. His was just a desire to bring justice to African Americans in the Deep South who were suffering grave injustices. I doubt that Rosa Parks set out to leave a legacy of bravery that would spark the civil rights movement. I actually suspect that she was tired and emotionally drained from the outright injustices and the accompanying microaggressions that she and others faced every day. I suspect that she was just looking for justice. So sometimes most legacies, good or bad, are what happened to us when we're just living our lives and following our dreams. And I suggest that that's what happened to the man that we honor today. Leslie D. Smith, Jr., and I'm going to tell you now, I don't do people in COVID. My husband can tell you in 2 years I've probably been inside 2 restaurants and then under protest. But when I read the letter from the dean and I did some research on Attorney Smith, I decided I wanted to be here with you in person today because his background was so impressive that I wanted to be here because it had a profound impact on me. And it has been said that sometimes greatness is born of adversity. And Attorney Smith may not have seen it that way. He probably did not apply to WNL to have his name placed on that board outside. And indeed, we know that he didn't because in his law school application, he wrote these words: "Law has been and continues to be a vehicle in which man may move toward greater freedom and individual dignity. I would be very proud of being a part of so noble a profession." He just wanted the opportunity to become a lawyer. He probably did not immerse himself in the law school in order to be honored for it, but looking back through the lens of history, it seems altogether fitting that he should be honored for it, and I congratulate you all on that. Because he was here, because he became an integral part of the law school, the students who were here then, and countless students who have come after have benefited from his bravery. Benefited in the sense that when you think of what he probably endured, balanced against what he accomplished, on your worst day, you have to say to yourself, because he could do it, I have to do it. I have no excuse. How many of you can imagine being the first and perhaps only student of your race, gender, nationality, culture, you name it, in a place as intimidating as law school? And you have to admit it's intimidating. Some of you may say otherwise, but you have to admit it's a bit intimidating. I would think that each of you can relate to how difficult the study of law is in and of itself. But to arrive on a campus as the only African American student in 1966 must have been quite intimidating for the average person. But history teaches us that Attorney Smith was not your average person or your ordinary student. I suspect that he would be humble enough to say that he was, but we know better. Clearly, he had great intellect. One of the articles in the backstory tells of him having attended St. Paul's College, which talk about something that confirms that I should be here today. St. Paul's College is in the town where I grew up in the county. And that blew my mind when I read that and read St. Paul's College on that application. But the article says that he was and had the highest academic achievement of any student in the history of St. Paul's College. And I know the reputation of that college before it failed. Some very, very capable people attended that college. And so we know that he had great intellect. He had a burning sense of social justice from everything that was written about him and everything that he had said. And he had a high respect for the rule of law. I wonder what he felt when he first stepped foot on this campus, attended his first lecture, the one and only African American student on the law school campus. I wonder if he was welcome in a study group, or if another student willingly shared a dorm with him. We can speculate that there was a welcome committee because, after all, the students here had advocated to increase or to bring in a diverse student body, and so they had advocated to recruit black students. But we all know that having a committee assigned to you is not exactly the same thing as having friends gravitate towards you naturally. I wondered on weekends if he wandered over to the undergrad campus to hang out with Mr. Haston, a familiar face, or at least of like hue. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that it is sometimes uncomfortable to be in a space where there is no one else like you. It is sometimes uncomfortable to be at a table where you are verbalizing an opinion that's not shared by anyone else at the table. And I suspect that there were times that Attorney Smith felt uncomfortable, but I also suspect that he found, as others of us have found, that it is in the uncomfortable spaces of life that we can grow. And it is in the uncomfortable spaces of life where we can allow others to grow and learn. And undoubtedly, he did grow and learn as he became a part of the fabric of the law school. And he allowed others to grow and learn as he became a part of the fabric of the law school. Recognizing the opportunity afforded to him to train as and become a servant of the law, he took full advantage of the opportunity. I suggest that his love of the law was demonstrated even more when he joined the Department of Justice in its Civil Rights Division, perhaps as a personal nod to his experience with how far one can go when only given a chance. And he worked in the compliance section on school desegregation cases. And I suspect that he did that as an attempt to work in the system from the inside to change things outside the system. And indeed, I am a beneficiary of his work in the DOJ. When I started school in Brunswick County in September of 1963, the schools were segregated, and they remained so until well in my elementary years when the schools were finally integrated. And so that connection that he had to St. Paul's College in Brunswick County and to the Department of Justice and school desegregation, and then my entry into a segregated school system, all resonated with me as I prepared to talk with you today. And I wonder what a greater impact his life would have had it not been so tragically cut short. So while his life as the one and only student of color could not have been easy, he made every minute count. I suggest that he recognized that to whom much is given, much is expected. And while his desire was to be a servant of the law, everything that he did to make that a reality requires that we honor his legacy. And even in death, he remained a servant of the law, as his epitaph simply read, attorney. So while there are those like Attorney Smith, whose legacies and names we all know, there are others whose names will never be called, whose names will never be placed on a wall, but they too, you too, will have legacies nonetheless. Maybe one day your name will be on the wall or a wall, but whether it is or whether it is not, may I suggest that you and I, all servants of the law, covenant to honor his legacy by cultivating our own legacy, our gift to the world. There is a phrase that is used in lots of professions, and when folks are talking about someone who has done a particularly good job, who has left his or her mark on society, someone whom everyone would like to emulate. There is a phrase, and it's a blank, blank. And the phrase signifies someone who has set him or herself apart, who has done such an amazing job that everyone recognizes it, and indeed all others are measured by it. And they've established a reputation that was beyond reproach. And it has nothing to do with where you grew up or how much money you made or make. It has nothing to do with whether you were a big fish in a small pond or a small fish in a big pond. But it has everything to do with character, the type of person you are or the type of person that you were. It's how you practiced your trade. And that phrase is a lawyer's lawyer or a judge's judge. That is what I want my legacy to be. And I suggest to you that you should aspire to do the same. And I tell you this because, again, I know that you're in your second semester of your first year or your last semester of your third year, and that part of your legacy has already been written. But it is here in the hallowed halls of W&L that you will really begin to write that legacy, and that you will establish the foundation on which the legacy that you eventually will have in your practice will resonate with those with whom you practice. And because we don't focus on it from day to day, I don't get up in the morning, you won't get up tomorrow morning and think, I need to do this because 30 years from now someone will remember it and it will be part of my legacy. And so there are attributes of people I have watched over the years, people I have had an opportunity to observe who have left wonderful legacies. And these are things that become a part of you, so you don't have to think about, if I want a good legacy, if I want them to say good things about me at the end, then I need to do this. It becomes a part of who you are. And so I suggest to you 5 attributes and what I'm going to call a bonus. And I will discuss those with you, and then I will take your questions. But we talked about it at lunch. How do you set yourself apart? And the first thing that I said was hard work. The study of law is hard work. You've already found that out. It is hard work. And, well, it should be. Because when you leave here in 3 years, you're going to hang up a shingle, you're going to join someone's law practice, and you will ask your client to place their money in your hand, their children in your hands, maybe even their lives in your hands. And you will ask them to trust you that you will do a good job with what they have entrusted to you. And so it is necessary that you do hard work now, because the hard work out in the real world is even harder. Now you are spending time learning what has been. When you step out into the real world, you will be instrumental in determining what will be. And so it is necessary that you be willing to put in the hard work so that you can protect the interest of your clients and those around you, and that you can protect the ideal of the rule of law. And so, as Steve Covey said, you begin now with the end in mind. That every day that you walk into that classroom, you give it your best and be prepared to put in the hard work, because when you step out into the real world, that's where the hard work really begins. Always be prepared. Part of the hard work is being prepared to be able to answer the hard questions. The paper that you write, that you just sort of put it together because it's 10 minutes before class and after all it's due, won't cut it in the real world, and you should not expect for it to be something that you do here at W&L. I love exhibits. I'm a children's Sunday school teacher, and so we always have exhibits. And so talk about being prepared, and talk about remembering when you were not prepared. Most of you don't even know what this is, but this, so some of you have been practicing long enough that you know this is an inner office folder. And so when you do that work for that partner, and that partner sends it back to you, they put it in an interdepartmental mail folder. I won't name the senior associate that sent this back to me, but I have ancient documents, that's your evidence class, that I carry with me to remind me that there is no substitute for preparation. I turned in this memo February 16th, 1983, and I have carried it with me in every job that I have been in, every bench on which I have sat, because I remind myself that the feeling that I had that day when I received this document back is not a feeling I ever want to experience again, ever in life. And so when I'm tempted to take the shortcut, I pull out the memo and I go back to the drawing board and I start rearranging paragraphs, and so always be prepared, because that's what this thing of law is about. It's too important to half-step it and not be prepared. Always be professional. Those of us who are already in the practice are very jealous gatekeepers of those who come into the practice, which is why you have bar exams and things like that. But there are almost passwords to entry into the practice of law, and one of those is professionalism. We very much, as a judge on the bench, as a justice on the bench, we very much appreciate lawyers who come before the bench who are professional and who are courteous and who are well-mannered. And that's one of those things that you sort of let sink into your spirit. You don't want to have to think about being professional. It should be a part of who you are. Close cousin to professionalism is courtesy and civility. When we walk into the courtroom, we call the opponent an opponent. The other side is called an opponent. But that does not mean that they are our enemy. Indeed, we're all working towards the same goal. Everyone involved in this legal system is working towards the same goal, and that is that justice be done and the rule of law be honored. And in 3 years when you walk out of here, and don't let it start in 3 years, but you start now being respectful and courteous. We talked about, well, what about the people you meet along the way here at law school? Will they remember the things that you did? They may or they may not. But you will, and it should be important to you that you be respectful to everyone with whom you come in contact. And not just in your practice, and not just in law, but in life. There should never be an occasion when we are less respectful to anyone. I know we carry the title of lawyer and attorney, and in some folks' minds that's a big deal. But there is never any excuse for you to be disrespectful or uncivil to anyone, whether it's the Kroger grocery store clerk or the stranger on the street. Civility and respect are part of those things that build your legacy. Be ethical. Every day you're faced with choices. You can take advantage of a situation. You can take advantage of a person. You can take a shortcut. And you don't want to do any of the above. The most effective students become the most effective lawyers, and those are people who are ethical, their characters beyond reproach. And then the bonus, to be well-rounded. I know that your time is precious and you're wondering, how is this going to figure into legacy? I know that your time is precious, but find time to spend time with family and friends, and to sit and to listen and to learn, to enjoy the things and the people and the pursuits that give you a little bit of a respite from the hard work that you will undertake. In your neighborhoods, you will be viewed as professionals, and people will look to you to take leadership roles. And I want you to start now when you're building that legacy, as you're thinking about that legacy, to take into your spirit that you develop a sense of giving back. You are beyond fortunate to be sitting in that seat in this law school at this time and in this place. It's not by happenstance that you're here. And you should, because of what you have been given and the opportunities that you have been given, be willing to extend yourself to others who have not had the opportunity, who may not have the opportunity, but who can benefit from the things that you have learned here. So I want you to find a way to contribute your tremendous talent to others who have not had the fortune of being here at W&L Law School, to help. That will be a part of the legacy that you will live. There are some specific things that I could suggest, but our time is short, but you know them: pro bono, children who are in less than stellar school systems. Make yourself available as a mentor, even now in your law school studies. Make yourself available to someone else who does not have the privilege that you have. And by all means, find yourself a mentor, because that person is going to help you see the things in life that you cannot see, that will help you to build that legacy that you want to maintain. So these are some of the attributes that we sort of take into our spirit, and we don't think about them every day, but we practice them every day. And at the end of a long career, then these will be the things that I think will help you, that will build your legacy. They exemplify to me the true servant of the rule of law and the true servant of those people that the law serves. Your studies will lead you to join an honorable profession, and again, it comes with tremendous responsibility, but it also comes with tremendous reward. My mentor, the first African American to sit on the Virginia Supreme Court, retired Justice John Charles Thomas, writes poetry, and I love his poetry. And it's even better when you hear him say it, but today you get me. But he talks about those who hold light in their hand. And the poem is called Light the Soul. And there are 2 lines in it. He writes, "It has been given to some to handle the light, to mold it, to craft it, to bend it to right. I interpret light as the law, and we as lawyers and those aspiring to be lawyers are the ones responsible for the light. We can bend it and shape it for good or for ill. Here you're preparing yourselves to hold light in your hands. Prepare yourselves well every day that you come into a classroom at this law school, and every day that you go out into the world when you leave this law school. And as you prepare yourself, remember those things that we talked about. Be prepared, be courteous, be professional, and be prepared to work hard. And as I prepare to close, one final word from Attorney Smith, drawn from his personal statement. It is our task, and he's speaking to you, to uplift the quality of American life. I'm not speaking merely in terms of material wealth, but also in terms of uplifting the spirit of man by enhancing his freedom and dignity. This will be the final measure of a life of purpose. In the quest to enhance man's freedom and dignity, there is no greater force than the force of law." Those are the words of Attorney Smith in his personal statement. So my final thought to you: live your life so at the twilight of your career, when you've made your final closing argument, drafted your last contract, or hung up your robe for the last time, when speaking of you, your clients, your colleagues, your friends, and perhaps even strangers on the street will pay you the highest honor of calling you an attorney, a lawyer's lawyer, a true servant of the rule of law. It has been my pleasure to talk with you today. I wish you all the best in your pursuit of your law career, and I wish you all the best in life. Thank you. Questions? Yes.
How do you rest and put boundaries on your time? And do you have any recommendations for us as students in how we could place boundaries on our time so that when we're working, we're not overworking?
How do I rest and place boundaries on my time? My husband would tell you that I don't. I'm serious, he would. I am learning, I am still learning to place boundaries on my time. When I first went on the Supreme Court, one of my colleagues told me it would take me about 5 years to get to a place where I wasn't in panic mode all the time. And they were about right. I'm 11 years into it, and I guess it was about 5 years ago that I started to breathe. And what I try to do is work at the office, come home, prepare dinner, have dinner with the family, and then if I need to go back to work, which is sometimes often I do, then go back to my office after I've had dinner and spent some time with the family, but my office and my home, I don't go back downtown. When the children were younger, I didn't miss football games. I didn't miss soccer games. I didn't miss dance recitals. I even did travel team dance. Yes, feel sorry for me. So what we have to do, because this law thing really is a jealous mistress, and it can consume every waking hour if you allow it to. And so what you have to do is to realize that you chose this and the family didn't. They just happened to come along for the ride. And so you have to be very intentional about setting aside time for you, for them, for the community at large. I do a lot of community work, which gives me great pleasure. And so you just have to be very intentional about it. Putting aside the work and knowing that nobody's going to come in and do it while you're not there, so it'll still be there when you get back. But putting aside time, and I'm working on that. Yes.
Justice Powell, thank you so much for your remarks. I found them very moving, and I really appreciated them. And so in talking about legacy, I'm going to ask you to comment a little bit on your own legacy, if I may, or one of your legacies, as the first African-American woman to join the bench of the Virginia Supreme Court, and on the eve of, I hope, the appointment of the first African-American woman to the United States Supreme Court. I think it's an important moment to reflect on the value of diversity on the bench, and I'd be really interested to hear your perspectives on why we need a more diverse bench at all levels, and maybe some good strategies that you've seen, or some good lessons that we've learned through those processes over the years.
Absolutely. One of the things is being the first African-American female on the Supreme Court, the first African-American female on the Court of Appeals, Circuit Court bench in Chesterfield, General District Court bench in Chesterfield, is the responsibility of doing the job well enough so that the door is left open for others to follow. And so I think for anyone who has been the first of anything, there is an added pressure of, I need to do a really, really good job at this because I need folks to not have an excuse to not bring more diverse people in. But the importance of diversity to me is self-evident. None of us think the same. And the way we think and the way we process is very much a function of our backgrounds, the exposures that we've had in life. And so the more people of different backgrounds and different exposures that you can get attacking a problem, then the more ideas that you have as to how you should approach the problem, and in my opinion, the better solution that you will give. I shared with the students at lunch, when the 7 of us are in a conference room and we're discussing, for example, statutory construction, we can read the same words on the page, and we will each come to not each of us, but some of us will decide it says one thing, and others of us will say it says something else, and it's not because we're messing with each other, it is because we have reached a different conclusion based on all of the things I've just talked about. And so the more you bring all of those ideas together, you have to come to a better, well-reasoned result. And so to me, it seems just intuitive that you bring as many different perspectives to the table as possible. And we're just not talking about black-white diversity, male-female diversity. We're talking about Southwest Virginia diversity versus Brunswick County diversity. We're talking diversity of all kinds when you get a better result, when you bring all of these ideas together. I do have a speech when you invite me back in the spring on the importance of diversity, and the first thing that I put on the screen is a box of 64-count Crayola versus a box of 5-count Crayola. I hope I answered your question. And there was a time years ago, and maybe not so much, when people would say, well, we can't find any qualified women, we can't find any qualified African Americans, we can't find any whatever the firm was demanding that they bring in as associates. And the answer again seemed simple. How about going to the places where they are? How about going to an HBCU, or how about, seemed pretty simple. Yes.
Thank you so much, first of all, for being here. I'm Sabrina Matlock, and I'm a 3L and going into public defense. And my question is around being a black female in white spaces and how to assert your leadership, dominance, and sort of your seat at the table. I don't think I've quite mastered that without kind of blurring the line between not wanting to look too assertive or be labeled a certain way. So how have you been able to navigate sort of that for yourself?
What you're saying is that you don't want to be labeled as the angry black female.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, I get it. What I have done, which goes somewhat into that lack of being able to manage my time well, when I walk into my conference room, I'm going to be the best prepared justice there. And when I articulate my point, it's going to be so well articulated that they may not agree with it, but they have to recognize the logic of the wisdom. And so that's how I have tried to address the situation. I'm going to be prepared when I walk into the room, which goes back to my points on legacy. I'm just going to be prepared when I walk into the room. And I've never been a table pounder. I'm not going to try and emulate the men in the room, because a lot of the men in the room, sorry guys, are table pounders. And I just have to be who I am, and that is to state my case, be able to argue my points, and I can either convince you or I cannot. If I can't, then I'll write the dissent. That's okay. But you have to be who you are. You can't be the person to your left or the person to the right. You just have to be who you are. And I think the best way to do it is to walk into the room prepared.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I'm actually potentially interested in litigation, and you mentioned preparedness and respectfulness. What's like one thing that can like really set the bar for a litigator standing in front of you in a case?
Know that record inside and out. Don't let me know your record better than you know your record. Because if I'm the justice and I'm asking you a question and I know it's in the transcript and you're telling me no, it's not, and we're going to have a problem, because then I'm going to start wondering what else are you not being honest with me about. And so you have to know your record. I say you start there. Know your record inside and out, and know what the important issues are that you need to address, and listen to the questions. Appellate bench, you're saying litigator, but you may take your case to the appellate bench. Listen to the questions that the justices are asking or the judges are asking. We're not just asking questions to hear ourselves talk. There really is an issue in the case that we need help understanding, which will help us to decide the case. But as far as a litigator in a trial court, as a trial judge, I needed to know just about everything the litigator knew that they could share without tanking their case. So I need you to know your record, and I need you to be able to articulate the important parts of that record. Represent your client well. Don't meet your client in the jail the day before the trial, because no judge is going to appreciate that, and your client deserves better. Yes.
I really appreciated what you said about your backstory,
Mm-hmm.
and specifically how your parents had such little education but ended up having children with professional degrees and master's degrees. So I'm wondering, was there something that they instilled in you as children or when you were younger, or lessons that you learned that I guess it reminded me a little bit of my family story. My dad is one of 6,
Mm-hmm.
and both of his parents, I don't think they had educations past middle school, but like your family, they came out of it with degrees and a lot of opportunity.
Yeah. I've thought about this a lot because I get asked that question a lot, and I didn't share that story for the impact. I share that story because I know that in any audience that I speak to, there are people who are more like me than who are not like me, and sometimes you don't want to express that because you don't want people to know, well, wait a minute, her mom and dad didn't graduate high school? How could that be? Well, it is not a defining fact. But I don't recall my parents actually pressing every day or even articulating, we want you to do better than we did. But it was in the atmosphere. They wanted so much for us, so much beyond. And they were, the tragedy of it is they were both brilliant people. I'm sure that, not to say they were much smarter than I am saying a lot, but they were both brilliant people, but the circumstances of the day were the circumstances of the day. But it was in the atmosphere that there is a better life. You have talents and skills to contribute to society, and you need to be about the business of doing that.